Hey, gang, it's me, Dr. Steve. And can you believe it? It's been officially 4 years since the world shut down because of COVID. I mean, 4 years. The irony in all of it, if you think it through, in a sense, the virus did what President Trump was trying to do. It exposed who the real patriots were from the phonies. I mean, can you imagine if COVID had never happened? Who would still be masquerading around in conservative clothing? Now, of course, COVID was disastrous. It adversely affected everything from, our lives to our livelihood, our jobs, our healthcare, our communities, even our journalism. But it's what has come out since then that's really most disturbing of all. Just recently, the ex-director of the National Institute of Health, this is Fauci's boss, Francis Collins, he came out and publicly admitted that the handling of COVID was wrong and it was actually botched. Watch this.
As a guy living inside the Beltway, feeling the sense of crisis, trying to decide what to do in some situation room in the White House with people who had data that was incomplete, we weren't really thinking about what that would mean to Wilk and his family in Minnesota, 1,000 miles away from where the virus was hitting so hard. We weren't really considering the consequences in communities that were not New York City or some other big city. The public health people, we talked about this earlier, and this is a really important point. If you're a public health person and you're trying to make a decision, you have this very narrow view of what the right decision is, and that is something that will save a life. Doesn't matter what else happens. So you attach infinite value to stopping the disease and saving a life. You attach a zero value to whether this actually totally disrupts people's lives, ruins the economy, and has many kids kept out of school in a way that they never quite recover.
Collateral damage.
So collateral damage. This is a public health mindset. And I think a lot of us involved in trying to make those recommendations had that mindset. And that was really unfortunate. It's another mistake we made.
Okay. What he's only now admitting is something, of course, we and people all over the world have recognized for some time now. Joining me today is someone who was on the front lines of the COVID crisis, Dr. Sarah Doyle. She's worked extensively to rehabilitate people affected by the disease. And as you can imagine, she's got a lot to say on the subject 4 years later. And best yet, as I understand, she's also a Turley talker. She's one of us. So Dr. Sarah, thank you so much for being with us. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Steve. It's quite an honor to be here. I've been looking forward to this, And I think in a land of all the woke insanity, it's really nice to have a Christian conservative platform to meet other people that are, like-minded and really leans towards the positive angle of everything. I've always been a glass half full type of person.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. It can be hard to do that, given as you can imagine, and as you know, being on the front lines, it could be difficult to see the optimism in the midst of so much insanity. But that's exactly what we do. I mean, and like you say, with our Christian background, we know as gloomy as Friday may be, Sunday is coming. There's going to be a glorious springtime of life. So it's been 4 years since the beginning of COVID. Now Fauci's boss, Francis Collins, he's talking about how the whole lockdown approach did in fact disrupt countless lives. It ruined the economy and disproportionately affected particularly kids' lives and their development, which the whole thing, if you could believe it, he's calling collateral damage, but he is coming out and at least regretting it. So from your perspective, what's been revealed about this mismanagement of COVID over these last 4 years?
Well, first of all, I think I can speak for the Turley talkers that we are 0% surprised at this admission. Right. I'm happy to see it happen, but not shocked in the least. I worked every wave of the pandemic in COVID ICU. Originally, I was a trauma therapist. So, if you don't know, physical therapists, they can play a number of different roles. And the role I chose to play was in hospitals bedside. So, I would walk into the hospital in my office in the morning, get my list of patients. I would chart review their comorbidities, what their MRIs looked like, what tests they were going for, what their lab values were. And I would prioritize my patients based on that. So, COVID ICU was, uh, it really dampened my spirit as a bedside therapist and eventually led me to quit. But what I can tell you is we, as, nurses and practitioners, like, it's almost like we knew it was a man-made disease because it wasn't anything like anything else I'd ever seen before. So my job historically was to mobilize people until their vitals would start to crash. Meaning, so I had all the gangster gunshot wounds from Miami Gardens. I'm from Miami. So I had all the elderly people who fell and got a brain bleed. I had the quadruple bypass patients. So these people need to learn to walk in order to go home. And, historically, you mobilize people, their vitals start to crash, and then you sit them down, you do some breathing exercises, and everything bounces back. But with COVID, they would continue to crash even though we stopped mobilizing them. And it was so scary. I actually started having panic attacks,
Mm,
bedside. And I was telling myself, like, look, Sarah, you're not the one with a tracheostomy, a hole in the trachea connected to a ventilator. It really took a toll.
yeah,
And as I'm telling this story, I'm seeing the faces in my mind of all the nurses that were overextended, working in fear, of the patients who weren't allowed to talk to their families, who weren't
yeah,
allowed to have visitors, and were too weak to even hold up a phone to FaceTime their family. You know how many times I held up a cell phone so that somebody could FaceTime a family member because they were so lonely, dying in ICU? It was just one of the most horrible circumstances like you can imagine, you know.
right, right,
And Dr. Fauci was a big proponent of this drug called remdesivir. It was a 5-day intravenous medication, and not everybody would get it. It was based on, if they met a bunch of risk factors, like how overweight were they, how old were they, and a number of other things. And, we kind of joked around. We called it death is near, not remdesivir, because I can tell you, I would see people on day one of the treatment. I would get them on the edge of the bed. I would get them practicing sitting, standing, doing exercises. But by day 5, they were intubated and, having like kidney failure. Yeah, COVID is an aggressive disease, but it wasn't just the disease.
right, right, right.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's very dramatic. That's very powerful. Gang, by the way, if you're interested, Dr. Sarah does have a free training on basically how to stick it to big pharma that you could register for just by clicking on the link below. She's going to show you how to reclaim your country by reclaiming your health. She's wonderful. Um, there are so many fears. This is one of the questions I get constantly in Q&As. There's so many fears around COVID's weaponization returning for this next election. What's your perspective on that? Do you see that happening again?
Well, Dr. Steve, if I had a crystal ball, I could tell you, but but
Yeah,
I don't. It's like I don't know when the next hurricane is going to come to Miami Beach and destroy my business either. But you know what I do? I prepare.
right.
And I think the best way you can prepare is by losing weight. Then that's enough. Even if you're 20 or 30 pounds overweight,
Yeah,
you got to understand that fat cells secrete pro-inflammatory cytokines systemically. So, if your body's constantly having that low level immune disruption, it can't fight its best fight. And fat is highly innervated. If you pinch your arm, it doesn't hurt so bad. I don't have much fat here. But if I go up to, this part and I pinch it, it hurts. And that's because it's highly innervated. And nerves require extra circulation. And that extra circulation takes a toll on your heart, takes a toll on your kidneys. And so, like, I tell people, when you're overweight, your body keeps growing. The demand for oxygen and nutrition keeps growing, but your organs don't. So, you're constantly disabling your body from fighting the fight. And then I would say the number 2 thing people can do is make sure that your estrogen, progesterone for women, and testosterone for men, your levels are high enough to protect against cardiovascular disease. The number 1 killer in the United States is cardiovascular disease. And the onset is typically after andropause for men and menopause for women. And why is that? It's because our sex hormones aren't at high enough levels to protect us. You see, testosterone protects a man from heart disease. It protects a man from cancer. It protects a man from other inflammatory diseases. So if your sex hormones aren't optimized, your body is more susceptible to some of these really scary diseases.
Yeah. It's so fascinating what you're saying there, because it seems like it's not just big pharma that's the problem. It's also big ag, big agriculture. How has the food industry played a role in this COVID crisis over the last 4 years, and how can people educate themselves to move forward in light of that?
So this is the crux of all my coaching programs. I always start with nutrition. And Steve, it's hard to eat clean, especially
Yeah.
when I travel to more remote towns and small town America. There's a lot of processed meats, a lot of packaged foods, grains saturated with pesticides. Steve, I even read an article in a medical journal, and it was a study on fruits and vegetables increasing the rate of stillborn death for a pregnant woman. It's not because of fruits and vegetables, because of the
Right.
pesticides. There's
Yeah.
xenoestrogens. They are neurotransmitter disruptors, neuroendocrine disruptors, and it's hard to eat clean. And sometimes there's a grocery store across the street from me, but it doesn't have many options of organic produce. So I order online. I order with Amazon because they're affiliated with Whole Foods, so that I can at least get pesticide free produce delivered to my door. Is that
Right.
available to everybody? No, it's challenging. And then you
Right.
go to the meat supply, because of fast food and the restaurant industry, our meat supply comes from 4 manufacturers: Tyson, JBS, Cargill Meat Solutions, and Smithfield Foods. And they treat these animals inhumanely. So I tell people, money talks. So when you have the option to support the farmer who treated the animal correctly, who fed the animal grass-fed food. I mean, grass-fed meat has a completely different fat profile than conventionally grain-fed meats. Like if you go to even a fancy restaurant like Smith and Walensky and you get a steak, well, those animals were fed grains. And those
Mm.
grains give more of an omega-6 profile, which can be more inflammatory. Like maybe you've heard a lot about seed oils like sunflower and canola oil, and
Right.
those are inflammatory. Well, these conventional meats are the same way. So, you got to try to seek out regenerative farming. Grass-fed meat, again, you can order online and have them delivered on dry ice. That's been the easiest way
Hmm.
for me to do it. I don't want to pitch any particular companies, but I've tried a few, and there's some that I like. And then I'm not a carb shamer. Eat your potatoes, eat your rice, but go for foods that resemble what they look like in nature. And
Mm.
don't be eating, have the rice, have your rice, have your potatoes, have your I love mashed potatoes. I'm Irish Italian. I'm never going to
Yep.
tell people not to eat things, but try to just eat them in their whole form. And you can actually recalibrate your metabolic systems using the 7X method, which I can talk about that later. It's a book that I recently published.
Yeah. And would you be talking about that in the free training that you have offered as well?
Yes, during the free
Yeah.
training, I'm going to go through each of the 7 food groups that are in the 7X method. It's actually a method of eating that I learned while traveling during the 2020 lockdown. I
Ah.
I needed a biological dentist, and living in Southeast Florida I mean, you might as well buy a Mercedes. So I went to Central America, and it was divine intervention. I knew my trip that God was going to show me something, and he put me in touch with, I don't want to call him a shaman because that sounds hokey pokey, but he was a guy who was working with people using food as medicine. And he was affiliated with this quantum medicine program of doctors who for 50 years, they've been using food as medicine.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Incredible.
it's so and so Edenic in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
You know, that's, I mean, we're always looking for the optimistic side on things here on this channel. And I mean, it seems like you're stumbling on it, as it were. You know, we've lost all public trust in big pharma. We're losing public trust in big ag. But do you see that as a potential beginning, you know, for a health wellness sort of renaissance or revival?
Absolutely. You know, I successfully launched my online courses and coaching program during 2021 when there was a real big appetite for that. And I also have a physical therapy, regenerative medicine, functional medicine clinic inside the Carillon Miami Wellness Resort. It's a formerly a Canyon Ranch property. So I lecture weekly to the residents and the hotel guests, and you know they love it. People want to stay off prescription drugs. I mean, look at the side effects. Look at a commercial. It's like people want to avoid that, you know. And I think it's important that we talk about a little bit of history here. And I know that's your field, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But you know, from what I remember, you know, we remember Rockefeller had the Standard Oil, and the Supreme Court found him guilty of the Sherman antitrust, and they made him break it all up into separate companies that still exist today. So Rockefeller had his hand in oil. And then at the same time, this is when people were learning how to use petrochemicals and turn them into pharmaceuticals. So what did Rockefeller do? Well, money talks, and he donated to many of the medical universities. And by controlling them and controlling the money and funding them, he persuaded them to convert from natural medicine over to allopathic medicine. And this is where we get the pharmaceuticals today. And this is why we have a sick care system and not a healthcare system.
Right.
Like
Right.
food can be medicine.
Right. Right.
It's
Right. It's just so fascinating. I love the way you're putting it, because we tend to think of health in the negative. We tend to think of it as the absence of disease rather than seeing it in the positive, sort of, you know, like the way the ancient Greeks used to think of it, just the sense of harmony. The Greek word harmonia would be something akin to where the body is in harmony with itself, it's in harmony with its environment, it's in harmony with others, and that is a healthy state. It's a very positive way of thinking about, and healthy spiritually. It's the holistic conception of health.
mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's beautiful. Give us a sense of what you're going to be talking about for this upcoming training. As I understand, you're going to be walking people through details of vitamin deficiency, the importance of a healthy circadian system. Give us a sense. I mean, it's all about what I love what you're doing. It's all about taking back our country by first taking back our health. We can't take back our country if we're flat on our backs in bed. You're getting to the root of sort of awakening this patriot revival here. Give us a sense of what you're going to treat us to.
Well, absolutely. You know, they say if you don't take time for your wellness, you'll be forced to take time for your illness. And what
Wow.
what I lay out for everybody is based on my experience. You know, I started studying functional medicine, which focuses on getting to the root cause of why a person isn't optimized. And when I was working in hospitals, especially the oncology unit, I knew that disease was a result of vitamin and mineral deficiencies. And the patients would ask me, how can they send me home? They don't know what's wrong. They're just giving me more prescriptions to cover up the symptoms from the other prescriptions. Isn't there anything I could do? And it killed me because these people, I'll never forget the desperate look in their eyes, and I wanted to help them. So I vowed to totally change the way I practiced medicine. I got certified in functional medicine, where I learned how to work backwards and help people recalibrate everything. And then, just as fortune would have it, I met the healers in Central America. So that integrates food and circadian science. And, they've been doing it for 50 years, and we're a little bit behind. The 2017 Nobel Prize for Medicine went to 3 men who discovered a clock gene, they called it, or a period gene. So what they realized, not only do we have our one circadian rhythm, but all of our organs and systems have that too. So what I noticed from research is that people who work night shifts, like night shift nurses, they end up getting insulin resistance, diabetes, and then cancers. It's not just the food, but the circadian disruption that causes these diseases. So in my programs and in the training, I will show how to use food as medicine and how to do basic maintenance on yourself. Like, how do you treat your own thyroid at home without going to a doctor for blood work all the time? How do you monitor yourself? How do you help with sleep apnea? I've got all kinds of tricks with, between 14 years of school and 15 years of experience. I've got a lot of nuggets that I can share. And I'm really looking forward to sharing some of this information. And I do want to add that everybody who signs up for the webinar will get a free copy of my ebook, The Thin Formula.
Wonderful.
Yeah, the Thin Formula I wrote it's mostly lifestyle modifications. These are things that you can do at home to remove toxins from your life. And when you detox these toxins, toxins are stored in fat. You will lose weight and your energy is going to increase just automatically because your immune system is no longer burdened. So definitely sign up for the webinar, whether or not you can make it. We're scheduled January 11th from 2 to 3 p.m. Go ahead and sign up now, because my team will send you a recording of the webinar, whether or not you make it. I encourage you to make it, because it will be an interactive experience where you can ask me questions. And I love that. I love helping people. I mean, that's my whole reason to be, is to, guide people and help them live a better life, filled with vitality and really have the longevity that they want. Nobody wants to be a burden to their family when they're older. Everybody wants to keep their freedom. You want to stay healthy. You want to wake up every day and be able to do whatever you want. And I'm going to show you how.
Gang, this is awesome. Make sure you click on that link below right now. Secure your spot, just like Dr. Sarah said, for her upcoming health training. You're going to learn everything there that you need to know to reclaim your health and not depend on big pharma. It's an awesome opportunity to make just 2024 the year the patriots reclaim our country by first reclaiming our health. And Dr. Sarah is going to show us all how to do that. I plan to be there as well, right there with you with my pen and taking my notes and just gleaning from Dr. Sarah's wisdom. Dr. Sarah Doyle, thank you so much for being on this channel. It's awesome to meet you, and we'll have to have you back again very soon.
Absolutely. What a blessing. Take care.
You too.